Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my mid-year book freakout tag. I was tagged to do this tag by Ben over at Ben Reads Books. You should go take a look at his channel. I'll link his tag down below as well as the two creators. I'll leave both their channels down below as well. I've never done this tag before. I've been on BookTube for almost 2 years now and this is my first time actually doing the mid-year freakout tag and I'm really excited about it. I've read 14 books this year. Let me check. Yes, I've read 14 books this year. My challenge for this year I actually reduced from last year just because 9 months out of this year I'm in school, so I know that I don't participate or I don't read as often or as thoroughly during my school time, so I reduced my goal to 50 books this year from I think 75 last year. And so far I'm like quite behind. I'm about 10 books behind schedule according to my Goodreads, but that's okay. Come beginning of August, I won't be in school anymore for at least the next year, so I'll have plenty of time in the latter half of 2020 to read as much as I can. But regardless, we're going to talk about the first 14 books I read this year. So the first question is a biggie, it's the biggest one, and it is the best book that I read so far this year. This one's actually pretty easy for me. I didn't really have to think about it too much, but the best book that I read this year was definitely Renegades by Marissa Meyer. So I've heard of this book a lot. This book tells the story of Adrian and Nova, two prodigies in this world. In the world of the Renegades, there are regular human beings and then there are prodigies. Prodigies are people with super abilities, basically superheroes. There was always tension between the prodigies and the humans, and eventually there was a group of prodigies that called themselves the anarchists, and they were led by the chief anarchist, Ace Anarchy, and the world was kind of topsy-turvy. They were kind of ruling the world. The government had fallen, all that fun stuff. But in the shadows there popped up a group of prodigies that were fighting these anarchists, and they over time took down Ace Anarchy, disbanded the anarchists, and created their own government and their own ruling system, their own police system, and that is called the Renegades. Nova is part of the anarchist group. Adrian is part of the Renegades. And their paths cross in many different ways. But I love this book so much. This book is incredible. I love the way that it battles with the ideas of good and evil, and like there's no one team that you can easily root for. I myself am privy to the anarchists because it's got my favorite character. And Adrian kind of drives me crazy, but it deals with prejudice regarding prodigies and non-prodigies, similar to the way that X-Men are treated in the Marvel universe, things like that. I adore this. It's one of the few science fiction books that I absolutely adore, and everybody should read it, in my opinion. Next up is the best sequel you've read so far in 2020. So I haven't actually read very many sequels this year, but this question was still also easy, and that is The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. This is the third and final installment in the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson, which is a young adult mystery thriller series. The main character is named Stevie, and she is obsessed with all things true crime. She gets accepted to Ellingham Academy, which is this prestigious school that basically runs for the last 2 years of high school and admits only a couple students every year. The purpose of the school is that the creator, Mr. Ellingham, created this school. He was this billionaire tycoon. He created this school because he wanted to foster learning, and he wanted to create this like maze type of campus that had so many twists and turns, different games that he could play, different passages to follow, all that kind of stuff. This huge maze, basically. He was obsessed with all things games, and he really wanted to foster people's education. The school only admits a few students a year. Its tuition is completely free, and you can study whatever you want, so it's mostly gifted children that end up going to this school. Stevie's accepted because her plan is to solve the infamous disappearance and murder that took place in the years of the founding family. Back in the 1930s, when Alfred Ellingham created this school, his wife and his daughter went missing. They shortly later found his wife dead, but his daughter was never found. The only thing left in their place was a menacing letter signed Truly Devious. Stevie is there to try and solve the mystery, and in this final installment I was so impressed I loved all the character development that happened throughout this story. In the first book, it was like really only Stevie that showed any development, but as the books went on, all the side characters kind of got lifted up. And I adored that because I really loved the side characters. The characters are really interesting and diverse, and I really, really adored seeing the way that their relationships changed and the way that they developed their ways of thinking. I adored the actual mystery. I didn't see any of it coming, and I feel like all the loose ends were tied up, which is something that's huge for me. I'll talk about that later in the tag, but I just adored this series. They're super quick to get through, and if you're interested in mysteries, I highly recommend picking up Truly Devious. Next up is to name a new release that you haven't read yet but are excited to. I have 4 for this list, one of which I'm actually reading right now. I haven't really, it's kind of somewhere else in my house and I didn't really want to go get it, but that is A Song of Race and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. This is the beginning of a new young adult duology fantasy that takes place in a fictional world but is inspired by West African folklore. It tells the story of 2 characters, Malik and Karina, as they are destined to meet and potentially fall in love, I think. I'm not sure, I'm imagining so. But at the end, both of them are on a mission to kill each other. Malik is a refugee who is competing in this game in order to win the freedom of his younger sister, who is kidnapped by a vengeful spirit. And Karina is the crown princess who is trying to find a way to bring her recently assassinated mother back to life and claim power for herself. Both of them end up on this whirlwind path to each other, and both of them are intending to kill the other. I'm super excited. I'm about 50 pages in and I'm adoring it so far. I'm planning on probably finishing it tonight actually, but regardless, I really am enjoying the story so far. It's really rich in its world building so far. Again, I'm only 50 pages in. We've only just met both the main characters and I'm so excited to see how this pans out. Next up is The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant. This is one of my newest books that I've just procured in my quarantine book buying mania. It's bad guys, but if you saw my latest haul you know it's bad. But this tells the story of, what's her name? Nina. Nina is a member of the Thieves Guild underneath the city of Paris. This takes place in the 1890s and is kind of like an alternate history of the French Revolution. It is also described as being a mixture of Six of Crows and Les Mis, which is very exciting. A lot of the characters are coming from Les Mis as like the main character. I'm always hesitant because I hate it when stories, especially written by people of color, are compared to being like Six of Crows. In my opinion, I don't think just having a ragtag group of characters or having characters that like one of them is the thief is a good enough comparison to Six of Crows. And I feel it always ends up hurting the book being compared to Six of Crows because people expect to read Six of Crows. They don't get it, they get annoyed, they rate it low. I don't think that's fair. I think people need to describe it more truthfully to what it is, but anyway, that's a whole nother issue. I'm very excited about this book. In this world, the royal family is kind of like hiding out in the palace in the height of the French Revolution, I think. And the world is run basically by the Wretched, which is a group of guilds living underneath the city, ruled by the Court of Miracles. Nina ends up joining up with this ragtag group of characters, a la Six of Crows apparently, in order to save her sister who has been targeted by the Tiger, who is the leader of the Thieves Guild, and will stop at nothing to have her. I'm really excited about this. I love the setting of 19th century France. I love the idea of a retelling of Les Mis along with that because I love Les Mis. And again, I love like books that are like an ensemble cast fantasy type thing. I'm so looking forward to this and I can't wait. Another book I'm excited to read is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is an adult romance book. I'm not very familiar with adult romance, but I've heard literally nothing but good things about this book. This book is a fun, lighthearted romance, but at the same time, it also deals with some kind of heavier topics I've heard, including loss and grief. But it tells the story of 2 authors. What are their names? Augustus and January. Augustus is a literary writer. He's attempting to write the new best novel of the century, whereas January writes romance novels. The 2 of them find themselves both renting beach houses for the summer next door to each other, and they're both going through major writer's block. After a fateful evening together, they both decide to conduct this kind of experiment where they're each going to try and teach the other how to write their genre. What I find really interesting about that is, like, I know that the more you read and the more you write different genres, the better your writing can develop. So I'm excited to see that play through with these characters. And I'm excited to see how it actually goes with each of them trying to write the other genre, because I know it's really hard to step out of your own genre as a writer myself. I'm super excited about this. Again, I've heard it's really fantastic and I can't wait to read it. Finally, the last book I'm going to show you in this little list is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Elizabeth Acevedo is becoming one of my brand new favorite authors. I absolutely adore her writing. This book, like her first novel, I think it was her first novel, The Poet X, is written in verse, which is very exciting. This tells the story of two sisters who, after a fatal plane crash, which is actually based on a real-life plane crash that happened shortly after 9/11 and didn't get much media coverage because of that. After the plane crash, they both find out that their father was on the plane, and then they come to the realization that their father is the same person and he just didn't tell them about each other. One of the girls lives in New York City, the other in the Dominican Republic, and it tells the story of them meeting and learning about each other, learning about their father, and trying to come to terms with his death and the revelation that they have a new sister. This book is going to be heartbreaking, I can tell, and I'm just so excited to finally devour it like I have the last two Elizabeth Acevedo books that I've read. Question number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have multiple here, so quite a few of these are sequels that I'm very much looking forward to. A couple are finales in the series, which, like, I can't wait. But the first one I'm going to talk about is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab. I love Victoria Schwab's writing. I've adored her Conjuring of Magic series. I've started recently reading her middle grade series, City of Ghosts, and I also have her other duology, The Savage Song and Our Dark Duet, that I'm very excited to read. Okay, so this is a story centered around the titular character Addie LaRue. She's born in the 1700s, and she makes a deal a la Dr. Faustus, where she makes a deal in order to live forever. However, she is cursed with the knowledge that everyone she meets is destined to forget her. Over the course of 300 years, we follow her journey and her life story until she meets a young man in this hidden bookstore who remembers her name. I'm super excited about this. I've heard amazing things about it from people who've gotten advanced copies. I'm very jealous, by the way. But this book has been in the works for over a decade, I think. She's been writing this book, and it's just something so different from what she normally writes, and it's just such an intriguing topic that I absolutely cannot wait to read it. Next up is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This book I've been looking forward to for a long time now. I've had it on my want to read list for a while. This is a story set in 1926 Shanghai, which I find really interesting. It's a time period / setting that I've not read much in fiction, or at least not in YA fiction. It says if you're fans of The Last Magician or Descendant of the Crane, it's good for you. I adore Descendant of the Crane, so I'm really excited for this. But it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, which I find really interesting. It follows two characters, Juliet and Roma. Juliet is the heir to the Scarlet Gang, and Roma is the heir to the White Flowers. They're two rival gangs, and they have always been fighting as long as the two gangs can remember. Roma is described as Juliet's first love and first betrayal, which I'm assuming is referencing an event from before the events of the book, but either way, there starts to be rumors of kind of like magical / plague-like qualities that are running through the town, and the two of them have to set aside their differences and work together in order to solve this mystery. I'm super excited. I love Shakespeare retellings, and this one is set in such a different... I love that it's set in 1926 Shanghai. I think that's going to add a really interesting element to the story, one that I've not read before, and I'm very excited about it. The rest of the releases I'm going to talk about really quickly are sequels, and all 3 of them are final installments to some of my favorite series. The first one is The Return of the Thief by Megan Welland Turner. This is the 6th and final installment in the Queen's Thief series. I learned about this series back in 2016 or 2017. I learned about it from Reagan over at Piers Project, and it is a ancient Greek / ancient Roman inspired fantasy world following a character named Jen, who is a thief. He is the queen's thief. He brags about being able to steal anything in the entire world. And when he is imprisoned one day, the king of the kingdom that he is currently being imprisoned in takes him up on his offer and sends him on a quest, probably an impossible quest, to steal a ancient artifact that has magical properties and would give this king major advantages in any potential conflicts or expansion. I love this series so much. It's such a fantastic series and I absolutely adore it. They're super fast-paced. They're super interesting. The plot, I've never been able to guess it. And I'm really excited to see this final installment. I'm sad to say goodbye to these characters, but I'm so excited to get a new book in this series that I don't care. Next up is The Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan. This is the 5th and final installment in the Trials of Apollo series, which is the 3rd sequel series to the Percy Jackson series. It follows the god Apollo, who has been struck down from Mount Olympus by Zeus after the events of the Percy Jackson books. And as his penance for his very lofty mistakes, he is sent down to Earth without any of his powers in the body of a very awkward pubescent boy named Lester. And he has to attempt to right his wrong. His main goal over the course of the books is to find and restore his 5 oracles, which are the people/spirits that are able to predict the future. He is the god of prophecy, so he's the god of all of these oracles, and he has to find all of these oracles and restore them before this nasty, like, ghost group, the Triumvirate, which are the ghosts and spirits of 3 past emperors of Rome, who are terrifying. He has to find and restore the oracles before they can kind of destroy the world, so that's fun. I still have yet to read the 4th installment, which is The Tyrant's Tomb, but I'm very much looking forward to that, and once I do, I'll be super prepared for The Tower of Nero. I love any Rick Riordan book that I come across, genuinely, and I absolutely can't wait to get the conclusion of this series. Then finally, the last book I'm looking forward to in this list for the end of 2020 is Queen of Volts by Amanda Foody. This is the 3rd and final installment in the Ace of Shades trilogy. I adore this trilogy so much. Ace of Shades tells the story of N, who is a very proper, put-together young lady. She goes to this finishing school. She wants to be a dancer, specifically a ballerina. And she ends up having to go to the city of Sin called New Rains in order to find her mother, who has gone missing. When she's there, she's told to find a character named Levi, who is meant to help her find her mother, and she has to team up with this con artist scammer who lives in the city of Sin, this place that is like meant to corrupt anybody who comes near it, in order to find and save her mother. This book is incredible. The series is incredible. The magic system in this series is so interesting. So the way that it works is that your family kind of dictates your types of power. Family names tell people around you what your type of power is. So for example, N, her last name is Salta. Her power is supposed to be arithmancy, like math, and dance. However, she finds out that she's not very good at dance, so something's kind of off with that. But the system is just so complex and really, really, really intricate and detailed, and I find it really interesting to learn more about as I go along. But anyway, they have to try and navigate the city of Sin without being corrupted, and in order to find her mother. But I'm obsessed with this series so much. The second book went into really like political territory, which was different and weird, but I adored it as well. She killed me with the ending of King of Fools, the second book in the series, so Queen of Volts better not kill me, is what I'm hoping for. But I absolutely cannot wait to read that book when it comes out. Question number 5 is your biggest disappointment of 2020 so far. This I have to go with my most recent read, actually, which is Conspiracy of Bones by Kathy Reichs. So I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's not a bad rating, but out of all the books that I've read so far this year, which is kind of nil, I'd say this is my biggest disappointment. It's the 3rd mystery I've read this year, and the only reason I'd say it was disappointing is just because I didn't get much of my favorite character, which is Agent Ryan. I wish he was in the book a little bit more, and then also I just kind of wish they had given it a little bit more of a like wrap up of the last book. This is like the 18th novel in this series. I haven't read them in order, so I mean that's my own fault, but they're hard to come by sometimes. But this tells the story of Dr. Temperance Brennan. She is a forensic anthropologist working outside of North Carolina and Montreal, respectively. If you've seen the TV show Bones, it's based off of these books, and the author Kathy Reichs is actually a forensic anthropologist who works out of Montreal, and these stories are very loosely based off of her own life, but also obviously adding much more mystery and thriller and action and all that kind of stuff. But this tells the story of Brennan trying to decipher a mystery after she has sent some gruesome pictures of a recently killed man. And there's also a connection between this newly unidentified set of remains and a cold case of a child abduction that or child murder that Brennan worked years previously and never solved. It goes into the world of crazy conspiracy theories, which I thought was really interesting and really interesting to read. I started this book at like 1 in the morning this morning, and I read it until 7:30 in the morning, so you know, I make good choices. Yeah, I just say it was a little bit flat. I really didn't like that at the end it was really info dumpy, trying to come up with like the resolutions and everything like that, but that is just a trait of these books. I guess I was just hoping for a little bit more of a big climax, but either way, 3.5 stars is not a bad rating. I still enjoyed this book. I thought it was a good read, and it helped break me a little bit out of my slump, so I will thank it for that. Question number 6 is the biggest surprise. For this, I have to go with Aurora Rising by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is a science fiction young adult novel that follows, again, a huge cast of characters set way in the future on a like space shuttle type world. After one of the best students at this academy for training space police, basically, or like a space UN kind of situation, like they're supposed to be peacemakers, but anyway, the star pupil Tyler ends up responding to an SOS signal that he encounters on one of his practice runs, and when he gets to the ship he finds it abandoned except for one girl who has been basically like cryogenically asleep for hundreds of years. This is one of the ships that had gone missing in his history and had never been found. He finds it, he finds her. Chaos ensues. Tyler ends up getting assigned a group of absolute misfits to be his new team as they go about their peacemaking duties, and he finds out that Aurora, the girl he just found, could be the catalyst for a major war. I really enjoyed this book. I'm not a big science fiction person. Like, it really takes a lot. Like, as you saw with Renegade, science fiction is doing wonders for me this year, but I adored this book. I loved all the perspectives. I loved Aurora as a character. I thought she was really interesting, and like, I don't think people give her enough credit for waking up like 300 years after going on this expedition to a new world and finding out that your entire family is dead, like, and everybody you ever knew was dead. That's kind of heartbreaking, and I don't think people give her enough credit for that. My other favorite character is Cal, and like, if you've read this, you know, but he's the one on the cover of the sequel that came out this year, Aurora Burning, that I'm also very excited to read. But anyway, this is the second book I've read by this author duo. The first was Illuminae, and I adored Illuminae as well, and I adored this. Like, I think these two together write very good science fiction young adult novels, and I'm excited to see where the story goes. Question number 7 is favorite new author or new to you author. This is definitely a new to me author, but if you've been paying attention to the last little bit, I kind of gave it away earlier, but for me this has to be Elizabeth Acevedo. Elizabeth Acevedo, the first book that I read by her was With the Fire on High here. After I read this, I listened to the audiobook of her debut, which is The Poet X, which was written in verse as well, and she narrated the audiobook, which if you have a chance to listen to her audiobooks, do it. They're incredible. Elizabeth just does such a good job of creating really lovable characters and putting them through a lot, but not in a way that seems inorganic, I guess. The stories are heartbreaking, but they are so rooted in truth and experiences of people who I will never understand the experiences, but they just, I don't know, they hit me in the feels. They're so heartbreaking, but very relatable to anybody who reads them. She deals with hard topics, but does it in a way that is a really, like, a pleasure to read. Doesn't really make much sense, but if you read her books, you will understand. Question number 8 is your newest fictional crush, and this wasn't even hard, but Nova Artino from Renegades. Nova is incredible. She is such a badass. She's my favorite character in Renegades so far, and I absolutely adore her. She is just, she's hysterical. She's so funny. She's got such a different sense of humor, one that I really adore. She's a badass. She's so impressive with her ability to invent these crazy weapons and machines and technology. I think it's really interesting that that is her like main focus, is invention and engineering, and I find that really like it warms my heart. And I love her personality. She's so focused on the family that she has found within the anarchists and protecting them, protecting those who protected her after her family died. And I love that she is dead set on protecting them, but at the same time, or she's dead set in her convictions, but at the same time she still questions them when she enters the world of the Renegades. It's not all black and white for her. She's able to grow, she's able to learn from what she sees, and I just find that very attractive. I don't know, I love her, she's fantastic. So this is the same answer for the next question, which is new favorite character, Nova Artino. See reasons previous. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and that is 100% The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I listened to this audiobook almost in one go. The Poet X tells the story of Ziamata, who is a young girl living in Harlem in New York City, and it tells the story of her trying to come to grips with her love of poetry and her love of writing and her mother's overbearing religion. It talks a lot about very interesting topics in that realm, including her very hard relationship with her mother, her very hard relationship with her father, her relationship with her twin, who is treated very differently by her parents than she is, purely because he's a boy, and trying to come to grips with what she really wants to do with her life, which one of her passions that she has to try and keep a secret from her family, which is her poetry. This book is written in verse, and it is just incredible to listen to. If you can listen to the audiobook, 100% do it. It's an incredible experience. Elizabeth Acevedo narrates it herself, and she is known for her slam poetry, so the fact that this is written in verse and narrated by her, it feels like she's performing it for you. And it's insane. I don't think anybody else could have done it justice. It's very, very beautiful to listen to. It is heartbreaking. It made me cry. Listening to Ziamata talking about her relationship with her parents and her mother, on top of her grappling with her own ideas of her religion, were really, really interesting and heartbreaking. But I think if anybody has any slight interest in this book, or interest in Elizabeth Acevedo's writing, you should 100% listen to this book. On another level, the next question is a book that made you happy, which is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. You can see why she's my favorite author of so far of 2020. This book is also incredible, but it is a lot more lighthearted than The Poet X. This book is written in prose, not in verse, and it tells the story of Amani, as I mentioned earlier, who just loves to cook and care for her young daughter. The themes in this are intense, like teen motherhood and teen pregnancy, on top of the struggle that young adults face in their last year of high school, of how they have to decide how the rest of their life is going to go. Insane, but one that's very relatable for many students, or many people in general. But I just loved Amani so much. She's a fantastic main character. She was just so bright and like warm. Her love of food and cooking really came through in this, and I love the random little recipes or tidbits of cooking that came in throughout the story. I thought it was a really interesting aspect. Her love for her abuela and her daughter really came through again as well, and I loved reading about the dynamic between that little family. The parts about her and her father were really heartbreaking, and then her trying to deal with like finding love and dealing with that in terms of her daughter and what she wants to do with her life. Malachi, the love interest, is just a precious being that needs to be protected at all costs. He was just absolutely adorable and such a great human being. He definitely added to that. But yeah, this is a really interesting one, and if you want a good if you want a very happy feeling, warm feeling read With the Fire on High. Question number 12 is to show the most beautiful book you've received so far in 2020. This 100% has to be Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez. This is a beautiful cover. I mean, look at it. It's freaking gorgeous. I first came across this book from my friend Coley on Instagram. I'll link her Instagram down below. And then I was recommended it again by my friend Kayla very recently, so I ended up picking it up. This is a fantasy book drawing from the history of Bolivia and its history and its politics. It tells the story of Ximena, who is a decoy condesa, who's the last remaining, or a decoy for the last remaining Illustrian loyal. Her people were decimated and her world was turned upside down by the usurper named Atok, and when he demands the hand of the condesa, Ximena has to go in her place in order to protect the true royal. But Ximena decides to take it upon herself while she is in the clutches of this usurper to try and find the magical relic that he used to overtake her land and potentially use it against him. She comes across a group of characters that are in many ways trying to thwart her and trying to stop her from doing what she's doing without necessarily knowing what she's doing. They're definitely in her way, or she ends up having to decide whether or not she wants to dethrone the usurper or become a part of a much larger grand scheme plan. I'm super excited about this. Again, I've heard nothing but good things, especially from Kayla and Coley, who are two people that I really respect the opinion of, and I am ridiculously excited to finally step into this world. Question number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I've got a large list here. I won't go over too many of them in too many detail because this video is getting really long, but 3 of these are books that I have already, and they are beginnings of series or new releases. The first is The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a retelling of the Iliad from the point of view of the women in the story. I'm very excited to read it. I've heard nothing but good things. This was recommended in a video by Jean over at Jean's Thoughts, and it's right up my alley. It sounds like it's going to be up the likes of Madeline Miller's novels, Song of Achilles, Circe, which I absolutely adore. So I'm very excited to read this. Next up is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This, again, I've mentioned this in the haul. I don't really know what it's about. I know it's got some type of magic. I know it's supposed to be whimsical. I know it's queer. I'm very excited about it. Kayla has been bugging me to read it, so I definitely have to read this by the end of the year. The next one is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a science fiction fantasy world that, again, I don't know a whole lot about. I started reading it, but I kind of wasn't in the right headspace to read it when I did. So it's somewhere else again in my house that I don't know where it is right now, but I need to get to that. And then the rest on this list are sequels again. The next book is The Tyrant's Tomb, which is the 4th book in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. Tower of Nero is coming out soon, so I have to read The Tyrant's Tomb. Then Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer, which is the sequel to Renegades. I just adore it. I have all 3 books, so I just desperately need to read it. Then Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is the newest release by Sarah J. Maas. I can't believe I haven't read it yet, but it's the start of a new adult urban fantasy kind of story. I think it's urban fantasy. It might be high fantasy, but it's more similar, in my opinion, to Mortal Instruments in the fact that it involves like demons and angels and shapeshifters and all that kind of stuff. Very different from her other novels, so I'm excited. Then there is Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, the sequel to Scythe, which I read last year. Again, absolutely adored. I have the rest of the trilogy, so this is just another sequel I have to get to. On a similar note, Soul of the Sword by Julie Kagawa. This is the sequel to The Shadow of the Fox, one of my favorite reads from last year. It is a high fantasy inspired by ancient Japan. Incredible, so good. Again, Night of the Dragon, the 3rd book just came out, so I have to read the 2nd one before I can read that. Again, Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Nyan. This is the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire, one of my favorite reads from last year. You're sensing a pattern here. The 3rd book just got announced, the title and the release date, which is coming out early next year. And finally, Deathcaster by Cinda Williams-Chima. This is the finale to the Shattered Realms series, sequel to the Seven Realms series. Again, it's the finale. I think this one I've just been avoiding reading because I don't want it to end. It's one of my favorite series of all time. High fantasy, high stakes, very fast-paced, amazing, incredible characters that I don't want to let go of. This sequel series follows the children of the main series, or the first series, and like, it's incredible. I absolutely adore it. But yeah, anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you had any similar answers to me, or if you had very differing answers to me, please let me know down in the comments below. For this, I am going to tag Joe over at Average Joe Reads and Soleil over at Little Reader's Corner. I'll tag you both on Twitter as well so you can see this. And anybody else who wants to do this tag, I consider yourself tagged. This is the first time I've actually legitimately been tagged by somebody to do something, and it made me feel very good. So anybody who wants to do this tag, you are tagged. Go do it. I want to know what you've read so far this year. These are like some of my favorite videos to watch. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like or a thumbs up because it really supports my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish or writing related videos every week, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye bye.